Hey friends, happy Tuesday morning to you. This is day 2 of our 10-day Thanksgiving fast. Those of you that are following with us, part of the King's Church family, we put out a call and an invitation to a 10-day fast beginning yesterday. This is day 2. We're just believing God that He wants to meet us in this time of fasting. I want to share with you a couple of thoughts from the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 9. Jesus, he models fasting. Of course, we shared on this some yesterday. He began his ministry after baptism with a 40-day fast in the Judean wilderness, going after the heart of the Lord, going after the heart of the Father, being tested by Satan, being tempted by Satan, and of course, prevailing. This was an intense fast, 40 days without food. It was very intense. The Bible tells us that at the end of that, he was so depleted in the natural that angels came and ministered to him. But he came out also full of power in the Holy Spirit to begin his ministry. So something happened where his flesh was diminished to the point of needing supernatural intervention, but his spirit and his heart were empowered in a tremendous way. He comes out full of the Holy Spirit. And throughout his ministry, he models this, and he calls his people, his disciples, to fast. It's not a command, but it is an expectation. He talks about this. He says, when you fast, don't be like the Pharisees. And he goes and gives an example of how the Pharisees would fast just for external applause. But he says, when you fast, don't be this way. So the use of that word when implies an expectation. He doesn't say if you fast. He says when you fast. And in the Gospel of Matthew chapter 9, there's sort of an interesting encounter and a question about fasting. John the Baptist, his cousin and the forerunner, John apparently has his own disciples that have been following after him, and some of those disciples come to him, of John's disciples, and they say, this is in chapter 9, verse 14, they say, how is it that we and the Pharisees fast often, but your disciples do not fast? They're asking this of Jesus. They're noticing this. You know, they are a people of extreme spiritual discipline. This is their normal thing, is to fast. They say, this is what we do. We're John's disciples. He's taught us to fast. He's taught us to deny the flesh and to go deep and to seek the things of God. He said, and they say the Pharisees do this too. They say, Jesus, listen, this is our practice. You know, we live this fasting and prayer lifestyle. Even the Pharisees, and we know you have a problem with the Pharisees, even the Pharisees have, you know, this spiritual discipline down, but you, Jesus, your disciples don't seem to do this. And what's implied in here is almost a rebuke. You know, it's like, what's going on? Why are we being spiritual, but your disciples don't seem to care about this? They don't seem to want to live this out. And Jesus answers in a very unusual way. And a couple things are going to happen here. He's going to answer their questions, but he's also going to introduce to them a theme that he's going to live out. Let me read it to you. Chapter 9, verse 15. Jesus answered, how can the guests, and of course, just like Jesus, he answers a question with a question. How can the guests of the bridegroom mourn while he's with them? So he introduces this bridal imagery. And he says, how can the guest, the friends of the bridegroom, how can they mourn while he's with them? The time will come when the bridegroom will be taken from them, then they will fast. So he answers a question with another question. He says, listen, you've been to a bridal party. You don't see, whenever the bridegroom is there, you don't see his best men fasting and mourning and weeping. You don't see this. When he's with them, they're rejoicing, they're celebrating. The time will come when the bridegroom goes away to prepare for his day. That's when the time for fasting has come. So he's doing two things. He's answering their question. He says, yeah, fasting will be part of the life of my disciples. But right now, that time is not for them. And he says, and then he introduces himself as the bridegroom. He begins to introduce this idea of who he is. The implication behind this is that one of the keys of fasting is fasting for intimacy with the bridegroom, fasting for presence, fasting for relationship. He talks about this. He says, when that separation happens, when I am no longer here, there will be a time and a place for fasting. And that fasting comes from a hunger, a desire for intimacy, a desire for nearness, a mourning almost. And I want to plant this seed in us. I want to suggest that at the heart of fasting is not manipulating God to get something. It's not like we're children throwing a temper tantrum and refusing to eat our vegetables until we get what we want. That's not the heart of fasting. The heart of fasting is a hunger for the presence of the Lord in a way that we've not encountered, a desire for his nearness in a way that we've not had. So even before we begin to fast, and I know those of you that are joining us on this fast, of course we fast for breakthrough. Of course we fast for need. Of course we fast for provision. Of course we fast for answers and wisdom. All that is modeled through the scriptures from the very beginning. Go back to 2 Chronicles 20 and the book of Daniel, the book of Esther, and so many of these places where we fast for breakthrough in external circumstances. Those are all good. Those are all God ordained. But Jesus introduces us to this bridegroom fast. It seems to almost be deeper and more precious in the sight of the Lord, where we're just fasting because he is not with us and we want him with us. Fasting for his second coming. Fasting for his presence more in our life. And I want, on day 2, I want to plant this seed in you and say, can we fast for more of him? Can we, before we have his hand, can we fast for his heart? Can we fast for nearness to him in this season? And I'm convinced that if we have that, if we have the presence of the bridegroom, we have everything. So that's my prayer for you. That's my encouragement for you today on day 2 and in day 3 and in the days to come. We want the bridegroom to be near to us. We want him to return. We want the Lord to return in his fullness. We want him to come and to establish his kingdom forever, to establish the wedding feast of the Lamb. And until that day comes, we want more of his nearness through the Holy Spirit. And fasting can bring that to us. Fasting can bring a nearness to God and a clarity to God that you've not encountered before. So wherever you are in your fasting journey, press in, ask the Lord for more of that. Ask the Lord for more of the bridegroom to be close to you. I'm praying for that for you today and believing for that for you today. Before we have anything else, we just want more of him. Praying for you. God bless you. We'll talk to you soon.